It was supposed to be a quiet night, another business dinner that meant nothing to him. The table was set for two in the most elegant restaurant in the city, candles flickering like faint reminders of warmth he hadn't felt in years. Ethan Cole, the youngest CEO in the country's history, sat there alone, his eyes fixed on the empty chair in front of him. His date was late, or maybe she wasn't coming at all. To most people, a blind date was an opportunity for love. To him, it was just another formality, a polite attempt by his board of directors to make him seem more human, more relatable. But as the minutes ticked by, all he saw in that empty seat was another reminder that even with all his wealth and success, he had no one waiting for him, no one who truly saw him. And then, everything changed with a single mistake. A young woman in a faded yellow dress hurried into the restaurant, her hair slightly disheveled, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked lost, clutching a worn-out purse that didn't belong in a place where the glasses alone cost more than her monthly rent. She glanced around nervously, and before the waiter could stop her, she walked straight toward Ethan's table and sat down. Her hands trembled as she tried to speak, but her voice was soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. And yet, something about her presence filled that cold, empty space with life. If you believe in kindness, destiny, and second chances that life gives when we least expect them, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, because sometimes the smallest act of fate can change two lives forever. Her name was Lily. She didn't belong in that restaurant, not because she wasn't worthy, but because life had been unfair to her. She worked double shifts at a small bakery to support her younger brother, who was sick, and her mother, who couldn't walk. That night, she wasn't supposed to be there. She was meant to meet someone else in a different cafe across the street for a job interview. But in her exhaustion and confusion, she'd walked into the wrong place. And by the time she realized it, Ethan was already looking at her, not with judgment, but with curiosity. He didn't stop her. He didn't tell her she'd made a mistake. For once, he didn't want to correct reality. He wanted to see where it would take him. So, he let her talk. She apologized for being late, stammering awkwardly about traffic and buses and the weather, clearly unaware that she was sitting across from one of the most powerful men in the city. Ethan, amused and intrigued, played along. And as she spoke, something strange happened. He found himself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in years. Lily talked about her dreams, about how she wanted to open her own bakery one day, to make pastries that made people happy. She spoke with a warmth and honesty that cut through his cold exterior like sunlight breaking through clouds. She didn't care about his status, his money, or his fame. She didn't even know who he was. And that made all the difference. For Ethan, who had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, Lily was different. She was simple, real. She didn't measure her worth in brands or success. She measured it in kindness, effort, and love. When she finally realized her mistake, when the waiter whispered something and her eyes widened in shock, she stood up, embarrassed, apologizing profusely. But before she could leave, Ethan did something that surprised even himself. He asked her to stay. "You're already here," he said softly, "so why not finish dinner?" That night, the CEO and the poor girl shared laughter, stories, and a connection that defied everything society told them should matter. Over the following weeks, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. He tried to focus on work, on meetings and numbers, but her smile haunted him. He found himself visiting the bakery she worked at, pretending it was coincidence, though deep down he knew it wasn't. The first time she saw him there, she froze. This man, dressed in a suit worth more than her yearly salary, standing in a small bakery, asking for cupcakes. It didn't make sense, but to Ethan, it made perfect sense. He wanted to know her world, not the glittering world he was used to, but the one where people struggled, fought, and loved without expecting anything in return. Slowly, he started helping without making it obvious. Anonymous donations to the bakery, funding for her brother's treatment, small things that made her life a little easier. But he never told her. He wanted her to like him for who he was, not what he had. As months passed, their bond deepened. They went on walks in the park, shared cheap ice cream under streetlights, and found joy in things money couldn't buy. Ethan began to change. He laughed more, smiled more, and for the first time, felt like he was living, not just existing. But love stories, no matter how pure, are rarely without obstacles. One evening, at a charity event, Lily walked in carrying trays of desserts her bakery had been asked to cater. The moment she saw Ethan standing on stage, the CEO of Cole Enterprises, the man the media called the Cold King, her world spun. The man who had shared bus rides and coffee with her was the same man she'd seen on billboards. The realization hit her hard. She wasn't part of his world. She felt foolish for ever thinking she could be. Without saying a word, she disappeared. She quit her job, stopped answering his calls, and vanished into silence. Ethan searched for her for weeks. He visited her old bakery, her apartment, even her brother's hospital, but she was gone. The emptiness returned, heavier than before. He didn't care about his reputation anymore. He didn't care about money or image. All he wanted was the girl who had accidentally walked into his life and unknowingly taught him how to love. He had everything, yet he'd lost the only thing that mattered. Months later, on a rainy evening, he found her again, sitting outside a small cafe, soaked and shivering, trying to sell handmade cupcakes to pay rent. She was thinner, paler, but her eyes still carried that same gentle light. When she saw him, she froze, guilt and pride battling in her heart. Ethan didn't speak at first. He simply took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The silence between them said everything words couldn't. He didn't ask why she left. He just said one thing, that he wasn't letting her go again. It took time for her to trust him again. She was afraid of being pitied, of being seen as charity, of not belonging. But Ethan proved that love wasn't about power or status. It was about choosing someone every day, even when the world said you shouldn't. He brought her into his world, not as someone beneath him, but beside him. He helped her open her dream bakery, but under her own name. She refused to take handouts, so he became her silent investor, letting her believe she did it on her own. Years later, when her bakery became one of the most loved in the city, she found out the truth through an old receipt tucked away in a file. Ethan had been there, supporting her from the shadows, long before she ever knew. That night, she confronted him, tears in her eyes, asking why he'd done it. He simply smiled and said, "Because you gave me something I could never buy, a reason to feel alive." Their love wasn't perfect. It wasn't built on grand gestures or wealth. It was built on small moments, on mistakes that turned into miracles, and on the kind of loyalty that never faded. They married quietly, away from cameras and fame, in the same bakery where they'd first truly seen each other, the CEO and the girl who sat down by mistake. Years later, when people asked them how they met, Ethan always smiled and said, "By accident, but the best kind of accident there is." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because sometimes love doesn't come from perfect timing or perfect people. It comes from unexpected moments that remind us we're all human. Sparkle's special request to tell us in the comments, do you believe that one small mistake can lead to a forever kind of love? Ethan and Lily's story reminds us that fate doesn't always knock politely. Sometimes it walks in by mistake, sits down at the wrong table, and changes your entire life. Because love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about finding someone who makes your world feel right, even when everything else goes wrong. And when that happens, you never let them go.